more importantly than the work, there's something I really want you guys to understand. I would never attempt to install firearm parts into a modified frame. Once I Dremel and cut on this and sand on it and file on it, I would never try to put a real P320 fire control unit in here. I want to strictly use this for airsoft, and if for some reason you attempt to try to put P320 FCU parts back into this after you've modified it for a Proforce Airsoft M17, then this is me telling you I wouldn't try it. I really want you to understand that you could be compromising the integrity of that frame after the modifications, and it's just not worth being cheap and trying to use it on a real firearm or with real firearm parts again, or in any configuration like that. Don't be cheap. Acquire another X frame. I'm sure you could do this to any of the X series and probably even the OG kind of frames. But anyway, to get a disclaimer out of the way, this video is for entertainment purposes only. It shows modification of a Sig Sauer P320 X full grip module to fit Proforce VFC M17 airsoft parts. I accept no liability for damage or injury occurring as a result of any attempt to replicate the material in this video. This video does not contain instructions for creating a firearm. It contains video creating an airsoft accessory compatible with airsoft parts. If you are as dumb as I am and you want to modify a frame based on my experiences, I would watch this video completely and then sleep on it before ever attempting such shenanigans. There are a few important things that should be noted when it comes to making these modifications here. There are no permanent modifications needed to the SIG Proforce M17 airsoft gun for compatibility with the P320X series frame. However, permanent modifications will be required to the P320X frame, which, once again, very redundantly, renders it useless as a firearm compatible part from that point forward. Please just stick to using this for airsoft after you make the modifications. I can't imagine it would go well if you tried, but I'm not going to find out. All right, so let's talk about the safety and how it plays into these modifications. You'll notice here that the M17 comes factory with the safety, and the grip module for the Proforce M17 is safety cut. Overall, there are really three different things you can do. You can replace the Proforce M17 safety with an appropriate pin, and I'll go over that process for you in detail. This pin can be removed later, reinstalling the original safety into the Proforce M17 fire control unit if desired. You could purchase a P320 frame that's already safety cut. Can't guarantee it'll work, but I assume it would. And then the other one is to cut the X frame with a slot on both sides to accept the safety on the Proforce M17 FCU. So I started this whole process by disassembling my Proforce M17. I'm going to give you a quick, easy rundown of how this happens. Make sure you remove your magazine, lock the slide to the rearward position, and turn the takedown lever. Release the slide stop and slide the slide off of the grip module. Now, the takedown lever should be easy to remove. I like to eject the fire control unit from the grip module by pressing gently on the back of the trigger, kind of in an upward motion, to unseat it from the frame. At that point, I'm going to kind of push forward toward the muzzle end of the grip module and then lift upwards to remove it. I can see a couple of obvious differences between the two, but it looks pretty promising. I use my calipers to measure the difference between spaces in the two modules, noting them to be pretty minor. After measuring the Proforce M17 FCU and the SIG P320 X full frame, I can tell that some material will need to be removed in multiple places on the X full frame to accept the Proforce FCU. I can see the differences between the two magazine releases. At this time, I'm going to take the magazine release out of the SIG P320X frame. However, I'm going to leave the release in the Proforce M17 grip module at this time. Once I remove the magazine release from the P320 X frame, I'm going to put that into a labeled bag and I'm going to put it away. Removal of the magazine release isn't too complicated on these P320 frames. You just need something very skinny and pointy. Paperclip works great. You'll notice on the side opposite that is pressed, there's a small pinhole here. And if you use something like a pick or a paperclip and you put it down in that hole and gently pry upward in multiple small motions while pushing in on that magazine release, part of it will start to come out. It's easy to go ahead and grab that, but watch out once you pull this piece out, because when you flip this around and remove the rest of the magazine release, a small spring will come with it. Pin that spring with your thumb and take your time wiggling the magazine release out. There's that small spring and how it sits right inside of that channel. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the first step in modifying the grip module. The space that needs changed or widened out first, you can actually see where the step down happens between here and here, where it gets wider here than it is here. And that happens on both sides, and it's much more pronounced on this side over here. You can see here it's pretty wide, and then it swoops out, and it's much wider. You can see here, it's not as wide as it is right here, and it's quite the difference. So the width we need to get to for this is a clearance that allows this front part of the Airsoft FCU to slide right down into the area here forward of the trigger guard to just forward of this takedown lever groove. But I would tape off to right here in line with this geometric change in the frame around back to right here. And that's where you'll want to modify from, just that little pocket to start with. And I notice here using my calipers that we got about 0.7320 inches there of clearance needed to about 0.7355. I guess it depends on how good I am with the calipers or the different tolerances between yours and mine, but you get the point. You determine the number and the amount of clearance you need, which in my case it looks like my FCU is showing 0.7320 inches, and I can see here that that same amount of clearance is definitely not available. It's much less. I have room reading about 0.6420 to 0.6295, 0.6305. But I noticed something here. The best way to do this is to obviously take even amounts of material off of both sides so your fire control unit remains centered in the grip module. And on either side at the top of this grip module here, there's a flat spot on either side, and there's also a raised spot here that goes down the length from about here forward to the end of the grip module. So you can see right
about there what I'm talking about? Well, I noticed in mine there's a line right in the middle of this bump that runs this frame. That line is on both of these, and that's where you want to sand or remove material to, is to where you have material left on the outside of that line, but not really on the inside. And again, you only need to go from about here to here or here. So from here to here to remove material for the first part. And you need to widen that gap on these sidewalls enough for this fire control unit to fit in that ways. I'm sure there are a lot of different ways to skin this cat, but the way I'm going to do it is to use this tape to make pretty clear markings of the areas I need to be cutting and the areas I don't, and hopefully that'll keep my cuts a little cleaner. The tape on the back will really probably just sit down in that groove as a reminder, because I can tell physically I need to modify this part, but it gets wider right here, and this likely won't need any modification. If it does, it's going to be a very little bit of sanding to remove material from there. That's the first modification we got to do. The biggest thing you can do here is be safe. Cover your eyes. You don't want plastic particles in them. That sucks. Ask me how I know. Measure twice, cut once, and take all the patience and time in the world to get this done, because these frames are $50, and even if you hate your money and you just want to keep buying them, that's fine. They still got to come to you. It takes time. The whole project takes time. At some point, if you've done this twice, you probably consider paying somebody to do it if you failed. Again, I accept no liability for that or your success. It's all on you. I have a rotary tool, and my rotary tool has a Dremel Flex shaft on it, and it's really handy. I've used the hell out of it, and I'll continue to. But I'm going to use this and some kind of head to remove the material. I'm going to try to go evenly across both sides and count my laps, and then slow down and measure it out. Count a few laps again, slow down and measure it out. It's also important to remember to use those grooves here or bumps here as a guide, and make sure you don't go beyond the center of them when you're removing material. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start this by taping off my grip module. I noticed there's a whole block of material right here. I don't know how it's focusing right now. That doesn't exist in the P320X grip module here. It's never posed me a problem with the airsoft function inside of this frame, and that kind of surprised me. I really thought that was going to be the biggest hurdle in the project, and I thought maybe I would have to add material to this frame to make it work, and that made the project a lot less appealing, but that's not necessary, and that's pretty relieving. It's kind of nice. All right, so that gives you a pretty clear idea of where I'm talking you need to be cutting at or removing material at. And it's not about removing material from the top. Don't do that. Just remove it from the sidewalls, there and there. I wouldn't remove any material from down here on the bottom. Just remove material from here and here. Take your time. I was talking about this earlier in the video. You'll never see because I wasn't recording, but when you buy these rotary tool accessory kits from your hardware generic tool supply stores, they do come with a bunch of different sizes, and even sometimes those same sizes will be different grits. The ones that look coarser are lower grit, and the ones that look smoother are higher grit. But for these polymer frames, I've destroyed a few. I would know you really want the higher grit than the lower grit, because this has a tendency to take a lot more off a lot quicker. More importantly, the higher the speed on the tool is going to be what really matters. You get that thing going really fast, it heats up the plastic and cuts through it like butter. To get a smoother finish, you use something that's a smoother or higher grit, and to get a coarser finish or knock out any scratches or anything to start over with it, you would start with a lower grit, coarser one, and work your way to a finer and finer and finer grit. I'm just going to start with something in the neighborhood of 150, 180, maybe 200, 220 versus something like this that's maybe 60, 80, or 100 grit. So we're going to go ahead and use something like this to take material off. It's not going to be deep enough to take it off equally in one even pass, but it's what we've got, so we're going to work with it. If you have some kind of drum that's an inch long, maybe 3/4 of an inch long even, you're really in business, because that'll allow you to lap the material off here in even passes and from top to bottom. I'm going to need to stay straight and take a few passes down here and then move my tool higher and lap it again until it's flush. It just leaves more room for error on my end, more user error for the person with the rotary tool. So definitely keep that in mind. If you have the patience, the money, and the time, go ahead and buy the proper drums. There's more than one way to skin all these cats as far as the different mods you got to make to the script module for this to happen. And I'm not showing you the only ways or even the best ways by any means. So if you're watching this and you can think of or did this in a better manner, or something that's smoother, quicker, or simpler even, leave that kind of information in the comments for other people to learn off of later, because that's what we're here for. We share that information. It gives us more power, or more potential power, to be able to do great things. And I think that's what we do when we come together as a community. So I probably have my Dremel set to about 18,000 RPMs roughly right now. I have it dialed between slow and medium, but closer to medium. And it's a 12, 24, and 36,000 RPM tool. So probably somewhere in the neighborhood 15, 20,000, I'll guess 18,000 RPMs. I'm going to use this. I'm going to go slow. A couple of things I can't recommend enough, especially for people shaky like me, is give yourself tools, things, stuff, baby anvils. Shout out to Jared for that one. And use these to brace yourself so that you can get a good, smooth, clean pass on this. Do keep in mind it's okay if you do take off a little more material forward of here than you need to, but I definitely wouldn't get crazy with that. This shouldn't be an insane project. I would recommend counting your laps as you go across and keeping in mind what kind of pressure you're using while you're doing it, so you can replicate the same thing on the other side. Here we go! Brace myself good. I'm going to start at the bottom. I can see just with my bare eye, without having to stop and think about it, if I've even come close yet. And I haven't, because I haven't gotten half of the width of this bump taken down as far as bringing that space outwards in here. So I know I've got plenty of room to work over. I just really want to do this nice and slowly. And I guess more importantly than counting my laps, I'm seeing is keeping this material smooth and taking it off evenly. So my plan of action there kind of changed, but recognizing that is what's important in a situation like this. You can see where I'm going beyond that tape just a little bit and lifting it up, but that's okay, as long as this stays pretty consistently smooth across its surface here. I've made a noticeable difference, in my opinion, between this side and this side, clearly. So I might switch over to the other side once I get fairly close, but I can still see right here. There's a line right up the middle. There it is. That divider is what I want to get to.
I've got my RPMs running a little higher. I'm using a little too much pressure or something here. You can see my plastic is melting, and sometimes when you do that, it just kind of pushes the plastic around in here, and it doesn't make for such an even passing. I'm cleaning it up okay, but you can see here, there are chunks of plastic that I've been having to peel out of here. Maybe a razor will help with that, but some of these are sticking to the tape I put in here. I really know where my guidelines are, so I don't need it, so I'm not too concerned if it comes up, but here is a big old piece of that plastic I'm talking about now, and that's not what you really want, so I need to turn my RPMs on this down a little more, and that might help mitigate that. So I gave this a quick rinse down, and it's showing up real nice on the camera, the part I did modify or sand on and the parts I didn't. So now you can see very clearly the area you're going to need to modify. So that's why I was talking about this mark north is pretty close. I went a little further because my sanding rounds up here, and it's not quite as wide up here as it is right here, and this is kind of like a curved area. Same on this side. So to account for that, I tried to put the curve up past the area that I needed cleaned out. This fire control unit still has the safety in it, so it's never going to seat fully, but just by slipping it in here, we should start to get an idea of if it's gonna fit. It looks a lot like it is. It's not giving me any resistance, but there's not really any. There's a little bit of left and right wobble room, but that'll be gone once it's fully seated. But there's not big gaps or spaces here between the fire control unit and the frame. It's pretty much just kind of barely allowing it to clear. But you can see earlier when I was talking about taking off about half of the thickness of this bump, that's pretty close to where I'm at. I do think I'm going to need to remove a little bit more material from this side. I'm not quite there, but that's, like I was saying earlier, I'm going to clean that up later on in the process. So you notice here, the fire control unit's hole is lining up pretty darn close. The only place I'm feeling like we might be getting some resistance is where these corners of the FCU sit right around here. So I might want to remove material right there and a little bit of material right there. That FCU measures in at about 0.7315 at the widest part for me, which is near the top of the rails or just beneath the rails on the FCU. And around that area, I'm getting readings of 0.7445, 0.7360, and 0.7, it was 300. 325, 375, and 0.7225. So it might be kind of snug. Watch out when handling these FCUs. Some little parts here, especially this spring here for the trigger bar, that one likes to jump off sometimes. I've even had experience with this pin here trying to walk its way out there. That one was a little bit beyond flush. Hook that trigger down there. When you're sitting these in, the tail should be seated first. However, on these fire control units on the Airsoft version, back here, there is this rectangle that sits here that doesn't exist
on the real P320 FCU. Now, that's going to have to be cut in here. And it can be done pretty crudely, or you can take your time and make it real nice. I'll show you how to do that. So this fire control unit, even if it didn't have a safety, just wouldn't fit this, regardless of how we've cut this part. But we can look at it. We can see that everything seems to be pretty close to lining up there. It's just not going to sit. When you do go to seat it, hook the trigger, and then you would slide the tail so that this goes beneath a slot in the grip module. That slot I'm talking about is right there. And this is what goes in that slot, but you can see there's no room for this, so we need to cut it in here. So we're going to go ahead and cut this slot. Now, I can use my calipers here and see that that is about 0.156, 0.157 inches. So if we open this up to 0.175 roughly and make a cut in the back of this grip module at about 0.175 inches, we can see that it's going to come pretty far. 0.175, and the whole thing is about 0.26 on this whole flat surface here. As far as width goes, probably closer to 0.25. So there's not going to be much left over on either side there. Maybe half of a hundredth. So to do that, I'm going to cut out a strip of tape that is about 0.175 inches in width and tape it or lay it down on the back of the grip module. And that'll be my outline for where to cut. Make sure we get all the dust off of here so this sticks. We can also note the depth we need to cut to. It's about 0.165, so you could basically make an even square of tape 0.175 by 0.175 back here, coming off from the front, and know that you have cut as much as you'll need to cut. Again, this cut's also going to be concealed for the most part, so if you go a little further, it's really not a big deal. So I feel pretty happy with my position of the tape in here. It's not absolutely perfect, but it's not bad. What I'm going to do is use this razor to make an outline for when that tape inevitably comes up. One thing I want to note is the difference between 6 frames. I don't even know that it's just from the standard style frame to the X series. I think the X series originally had these little wings sticking off the back, just like this. SIG later eventually removed those altogether. So if your grip module, your X frame grip module has these, just whack them off flush. I actually took mine off with a razor. You could use a Dremel. There's a lot of different ways to get them off if you've got them. I have a TXG grip module for the P320, and it doesn't have the notches on the back, and it came that way new. So it'll be possible that these notches get in your way with the Airsoft FCU. You can kind of tell the way it sits in there. It shouldn't matter, but lop them off if you need to. I'm going to choose to use a finer pointed bit versus a rounded one that I could use for cutting this out because I want to keep the channel kind of square. We'll see how that works out for me.
I'm gonna remove the tape. Kind of drill a hole in each corner. And just drag the tool straight down. And the material seems to be melting a little. I'm gonna try to use my razor to clean that up a little bit. These razors are not made for this. Be careful. If you do this, use them at your own risk. Or tell me the better tool to use in the comments, because I'm a ding-ding. Probably gonna put a different head on my rotary tool. Something like this, which will be perfect for cleaning this up. I think it would be better if that wasn't so dull. And we kick up our speed a little. So now I've created a square-ish cutout at the back here to make room for that notch in the back of the Airsoft FCU. So now this should be able to see all the way in there when the safety isn't in the way. So that brings us to the next project here, safety removal. You'll notice with the SIG Proforce VFC Airsoft 16 of the named fire control unit here,
there's a safety on either side. The firing side, which is serialized, and the other side, or the left side of the pistol. The right side of the frame with the serialized has the switch, and it also has this piece right here that would stop you from taking the safety off and pulling the bar through to the other side. So it's important with the trigger facing forward like you would shoot the gun. The left side is the side, the non-serialized side is the side you need to be removing the safety from. Do not remove it from this side. If you remove it from this side, you get this whole piece to come off, and then the bar can slide out the firing side. That's how you're going to want to remove this. As we talked about earlier, with things sliding around when you handle these FCUs, they're all like this. You'll notice this fire control unit that I'm holding right now has this trigger bar pin just kind of all out of whack. It's sticking out right here, and it's not even in the hole over here. You can carefully just press that right back in, which you need to be careful and make sure it doesn't fly all the way out. I don't know when it comes all the way out if anything else comes out with it or not, and I'm not trying to find out. So again, keep an eye on that, and keep an eye on this spring for the trigger bar here, and make sure it doesn't go anywhere on you. Don't try to pull the trigger with the whole thing apart. It's just going to cause you more issues. Or it can anyways. I would just stray away from doing it. No need to, really. Don't tempt yourself. So now, that being said, we are going to take the safety off of the left side. Because I'm using the same dirty workspace I just sanded on or doing other things right now, I'm just going to cover up that mess here to try to keep this fire control unit clean. Be as meticulous as you want to be. This is about where the buck stops for me, dog. If you remove the safety from this, the bar inside of here that holds a lot of things in place is going to come out. I see a spring right down here for one that I imagine is wrapped around that safety bar. I'm pretty sure I can see that it is in there. This hammer here looks like it also rides on the safety bar there. It's quite a bit going on that rides on that. So I always made sure that there was some kind of bar in here 100% of the time. In other words, I am not going to take this safety out until I can push another bar through here to push that safety bar out. So we need to create our own safety bar or safety pin to go through the fire control unit. So that's what we're going to do next. To make a new safety bar for the VFC FCU for your M17 P320, I made mine pretty simply out of a 16D 3.5 inch smooth shank finishing nail. Now I know that the diameter of the safety bar's pin in here is about 0.1165 or 0.1170 of an inch, and this nail itself is 0.1185 to 0.1190 of an inch. So we're gonna have to bring this down about 0.0020 in diameter for it to function as our safety bar. This one's a little bit rusty because it's a couple of years old. We can take that surface rust off with some sandpaper and a drill, because I'm not going to sit here all day and do this by hand. We do know that we need a good shank on this pin that is the diameter I mentioned, about 0.1165, and it needs to be about 0.8980 of an inch here, maybe just a little bit bigger than that and rounded at the tips. The real thing is it can't be any bigger than exactly 0.9 inches, because that's all that's going to fit inside of the grip module. So you need to make sure that that pin is absolutely not bigger than 0.9 of an inch, but probably somewhere much closer to the neighborhood of 0.815, 0.8060. So I'm going to handle this the simple way. I've got a drill here, some power. One thing I do need, and it's important, is going to be a glove, because I'm going to hold this sandpaper and run the shank of this nail through the drill chuck and spin it. But I can tell you, ask me how I know, this is going to heat up pretty quickly. It's going to heat up the sandpaper, it's going to heat up the nail. We need to be going slow. It's okay to rinse it off or dunk it in cool water as you go to cool it down. You never want this to get super hot. We're trying to take a little bit of material off. So take your measurements, know what you need to be hitting, know what you are hitting, and know what lapping it in your hand for 2 minutes does to it. I want to be careful not to let this get wrapped up in my glove either. Now it's nice and shiny, looks good. I'm gonna measure it here. I know I'm going, it started about 0.1185 at the lowest spot, and I want it to be about 0.1165. So we're at about 0.1215, so 1.1185. So we're still about where we started, 0.1180. So we need to keep working on this. It's going to be a lot longer than I questioned, but I just wanted to know so I didn't overdo it. So back to it. I'm sure this is pretty hot. I'm not trying to find out. I'm still getting interesting measurements like 0.1175, 0.180, but it does seem to be taking it down a little bit. I'm going to try the 220 and see if I can get better coverage on the nail itself and see if that'll help bring it down. I'm reading 0.1160, 0.1165, 0.1160, 0.1160. This is perfect. It's going to be right about 0.875, which is the space I've marked off on this nail with the tape. So I don't want to cut into the tape on the other side, and I'll have the piece of nail the proper size to create my pen out of. The only thing I'll need to do then is round the sides off so they don't get stuck on the channel.
We'll have room for a little bit of material to be taken off. Depending on how hot you get this pen when you're cutting it, will depend on how much stickiness from the tape is left on the pen. Anyway, my edges are pretty not pretty. They're pretty sharp, so we're definitely going to clean that up. We can take this piece and chuck it right back up in the drill. I'm just going to take my drill and this piece of sandpaper. Give it a little love. Definitely want to be aware it could be hot. Now the whole point here is to make this as smooth as it can be, so it's not getting caught up on anything. Doing it at an angle like that should help round the corner. There we go. Nice and smooth. Not gonna hurt me, not gonna catch me on any burrs. Good. This end, terrible. This end, nice. Watch out if you do cut this in the same ridiculous manner I cut mine, because there will be a little metal protrusion from the end of your nail pieces. You'll want to get rid of that. Should be measuring to about 0.875. It's pretty close. It's just not there yet. Maybe if we round it out. We know the gap in the grip module is 0.9. So instead of being 0.8750, mine actually measures 0.8365. Or 360. Maybe a little small in the end, I guess. Getting as small as 0.855. I say we try to test fit it in. So remember, unless I'm crazy and about to completely screw myself, the left side of the FCU safety is the one you want to remove first. At the back of it, there is a small hex bit or a hex screw that needs backed out. I want to slowly start pulling that pin out the right side of the FCU, but checking as soon as I can to make sure that the pin I made is going to go in that hole. Also making sure to keep a gentle amount of pressure on these parts, and using the new pin to push the old pin out. Do not pull the old pin out. Now, with this method, I have successfully pushed the old pin out, leaving the new pin in, and none of these parts messed with. You can see, though, how that trigger bar spring has come off because I was messing with these parts. Be careful not to lose that. If it comes off a second time during the project, I'm probably going to leave it off until I'm finished. I do want to reset this hammer, though. Everything seems to be functioning correctly. I can see the pin here on this side, and here on this side, just a little bit beyond flush here. And the same on this side. Perhaps more so on this side, because the room that's made for the trigger bar to clear allows for more on this side. Just make sure when you cut it pretty close, but not too short. I think too short may be a bit of a challenge, as long as you have it close. Now that we've removed our safety, we can do a test fitment in the X5 or X series P320 grip module and see how it sits. But first, I like to take these very important parts here and put them somewhere safe. All right, time to test the fitness of this FCU, this M17 FCU, into this X series grip module here. We're gonna make sure we put that trigger in first, and then make sure we have cleared the back here so that this tab can get down in there. Looks pretty close to fitting in the front. One thing I can see here is back here, there's a gap between the fire control unit and the back of the grip module. This gap should not be here. On this VFC M17 model, with the mod performed, you can already see that gap doesn't exist back here. And here you can see a side-by-side. Not much of a difference in what you're looking at, but a couple of great ways to tell the differences. Again, I can get the pick in here, and I can't get this fire control unit any further back. And in this one, I simply could not get the pick in there. So there is a little bit of space difference here, and a great way to see on camera is right here. There's about 3 millimeters of space between the edge of the plastic grip module and the back of the FCU. In here, there's maybe 1 or 1.5 millimeters.
showing. So this fire control unit inside this grip module does need to go back further to be fully seated in here. You can see right there what I'm talking about. So I can see with my naked eye where this piece of the hammer mechanism sits touching this plastic. So I need to take this plastic right here and mill off a couple of millimeters of the inside of the plastic from top to bottom, not from left to right or right to left, but just on the right side going down. You can kind of see a difference between it right here about how much needs taken off to give clearance room for this and for these rails to finish sitting all the way backwards. To do that, we're going to take material off the face of this portion of the grip module right here. So we'll take off material right where the pick is touching from here up here, as deep as the edge or corner of the grip module here. This bit should let me evenly lap off material in the area where it needs to come from. Looking at the fire control unit, it does need to go about 3/4 the depth of the bit, so I'm just going to go the whole depth of the cutting part of the bit here and clear out a little bit of a channel for this cylindrical piece to fit in. Let's take a little bit off by that. God, it took a lot for what we're doing. But now you can see where, instead of being as thick as from here to here, this piece is now only about half that thick. Just kind of move the flash around with my fingernail. Kind of helps to get it picked up. You can use your toothbrush for brushing your teeth and cleaning your guns. It's awesome. And you only need one brush for the whole job. Now we can see if that fire control unit is going to fit. Remember, trigger first. Go ahead and ease that back on in. And you'll see here we seem to be a lot closer to fitting. A lot closer. That almost drops right in. You can see for the most part here, we've eliminated any kind of gap that was back here by allowing room for this to come back. But we still haven't changed the profile from an outside or an end view because we never actually cut on this surface, just the front side of it, making it thinner. This side used to look like this, now it looks like that. That should take care of the clearance issues for the back. Now I can see in the front, I just haven't cleared out enough space for this fire control unit to sit down in here. If we look down here, I can tell that along this area and this area down here, more material will need to be removed for this to sit lower. Once I do that, we shouldn't have any kind of issue here with putting the FCU inside of the grip module, but that doesn't mean the work's over. On a higher speed, these diamond bits seem to do okay, so I'm going to try to use them to clean out this channel right here, because it comes in a little bit, and I think that's likely what the fire control unit's catching on. That's what's preventing it from seating fully. So let's go ahead and widen this out near the bottom right here. All right, now just take a little bit off and a little bit off and a little bit off, bit by bit, seeing if it fits along the way. Retest fit number 1, I guess. It's fitting so much better. It's much, much closer to where it needs to be, if not right where it needs to be. I think that's probably great, actually. One thing we can do is test a takedown lever in it and see how it fits. Now, one thing I noticed on the previous mod I did is you must use the Airsoft takedown lever. It has a notch that doesn't exist in the one that's made for the SIG P320. The one for the VFC M17, though, fits it. It's a little bit loose. While it's so much easier to get in than a standard takedown lever pin, it's a little bit loose. My thinking is I can replace this gasket with one that's got a thicker diameter, and that'll keep it in. But once this is locked in here with a slide on, that pin will not come out. You're not going to lose it. I can see on this side, it's just not wanting to seat all the way. So I'm going to need to take some more material off the right side inside of this grip module here so that this will finish seating. And then we clean the stuff out of it and try again. There we go. Now we've got the fire control unit fitting inside. Looks great. It feels like hopefully we're done, ready to slap that puppy together and run it, but it just won't happen for a couple of reasons still. You'll notice trying to take an assembled slide here and put it on that you're going to run into some issues. If we take the spring guide out and the barrel assembly out of our slide, we notice something. that airsoft slide is just a little thick to have any business with this grip module. And we're not in the business of modifying these airsoft parts. I want to modify this $50 highly replaceable piece of plastic that's not serialized for real guns or toy ones or anything for that matter. It's kind of cool though that the window for the serial number on the toy shows up just right. This is pleasing though. It's a great place to be. You have your fire control unit sitting inside of your grip module and it feels nice, but it's about to start feeling not so nice. So we have to deal with this problem here. And I know what you're thinking, it's just a little sanding. And that's exactly right. That's really all it is. You just have to sand this channel as uniformly as you can from side to side, the bottom. You want to make a point to hit all of the walls. So what I did is got a wooden dowel. Guess you could use a Sharpie, and I wrapped it in sandpaper. You want to start with something more coarse or you're going to be at this forever. I certainly wouldn't start with anything higher than 220 here. Maybe something like 120 would be a fantastic place to start. Wrap your dowel or your Sharpie or your tool and just work this channel down. Spend a minute doing it, work it. Put this back on. See, we want this to be like butter in here. It should just glide. It should not be able to do this. We should just be able to take it, put it in here, and have it slide right through. So that's the next step of the project. Please, please, please take your FCU out of your grip module to do this. Same thing, lift up gently on the trigger, lift the back out, and then pull it out. All right, I'm going to get started on this, and then I'm going to slowly fit it, make sure it fits there okay, and then we'll move on to the next step after that. Yes, there's more.
This is an old piece of plastic from my junk drawer, and this is part of a sanding belt. I'm going to go ahead and use the two things together to create a tool that I can use to sand this channel. And I want to sand this as evenly as I can. All right, you can see where the wear is showing up. And I'm taking off some of the material here, hoping for a smoother ride. This still sits in here pretty snugly, so we're gonna keep working at it.
We go.
Take a little bit more there and check it again. Can still see it's much too tight, but it's definitely worlds better than it was. All right, a little bit more work's been completed. We're going to go ahead and check this again here. I can feel a little bit of resistance, not at the front, but about midway, halfway down the rails, and back to the end of the rails. So the front is pretty good, but through here, it's going to need some more work. So I'm going to keep working on opening up from about the midsection back. But this area right here seems to be covered pretty good. Let's see how the slide slides. Like butter, like we were talking about, like butter, forget about it. Nothing's holding that back. There should be play there. There's play in every gun, every slide operated semi-automatic firearm or airsoft gun I've ever seen. There's always a little bit of play there, and there needs to be. That's great. That modification is complete. Now there's really just one more painstaking mod to do. Another thing to do is going to be mag fitment, and we do have to put the magazine catch or magazine release in, but before we do that, I want to note something. You've come all this way in the project, and you'll see your magazine doesn't fit. And I'm not being silly. It really does not fit. There is not enough room in here anymore for your magazine to fit. You'll notice if you tried it without the FCU in, if you held down the magazine button or without a magazine button in, this would slide all the way in. What's stopping it is the fire control unit. You'll see here on the back where I've beat mine up trying to figure this out myself. There's a little groove in the middle on the inside wall where the rear of the mag would sit in my fire control unit. And what that is from is this button at the back of the valve smacking it. To get that magazine to fully seat in there, it has to sit further forward than it does right now. So the way that we make this happen is by removing more material from this X series grip module. The next place material is coming off is the front wall inside the grip module, all the way from the bottom of the mag well here all the way up to the top where this plastic wall meets this horizontal surface here. This whole surface needs brought down a couple of millimeters. It's very obvious that that's what needs to happen when you look at the Proforce VFC M17 grip module compared to the 6R P320 X series grip module. When you set them side by side, it's extremely obvious that there is a difference in the thickness of material here and here. So yes, to make this happen the way it needs to, material needs to come off of this front side about 2 millimeters worth. It's going to take a lot more patience than what it took to sand this channel out. Maybe about the same amount, perhaps more. Take your time with that project and measure to check fit frequently. Although that does add to the amount of time the project takes, there's no adding material once you stop. Because you're removing material from the grip module, you're going to have to modify it yet once again to make up for this. On my modified module, I have added a grip weight. You can see some experimental milling back here, which was not necessary, so I left that out of the video. I have added the grip weight to my grip module here, and I also added some sticky Velcro to the grip weight before I inserted it. Now you'll be able to add a grip weight too, whereas I don't believe you could hold one before. It's like a faux channel here. So now you can insert a grip weight in here, and then you add the loop or the soft side of Velcro, and that shims this up perfectly so that your magazines don't have a problem staying in place. Right now with this one empty, you'll notice there's no problem with it going in either.
So now we start a very, very large project, and you can really see the difference in these two between a modified frame and an unmodified frame. An unmodified frame has a thickness at the top of about 0.177. A modified frame has a thickness at the top of about 0.1320. I see what you did there, Sig. So there's a couple of ways to skin this cat. You may know one that's a lot more efficient than mine, but I've got a couple of tools I'm going to use. One is a good old flat hand file. You just need to make sure it's the correct width in here. This seems to be pretty good. That's what I used last time, along with these. These are tongue depressors or popsicle sticks that have been wrapped in that 120 grit or 120 grit sandpaper. These will allow me to work this area from one side or the other until I have it down to where it needs to be. You have to remain even with this, and it's not a bad idea to put this in a vise while you're doing this. So the view is going to be a little bit distorted for you, but I've blocked off this channel with some pieces of craft wood here. That way I don't pinch this in the vise and buckle it in or break it or bend it or anything. And then I'm just going to sit it down in my vise, tilt it forward, clamp it down in place until it doesn't want to move anymore. And then I'm going to use this sandpaper wrapped popsicle stick or craft stick here to just work this in and out between that and this file, making smooth, even passes. It's going to take a while. Your mileage may vary. I find it helpful sometimes to have something like a file sitting over top of this just so you can get a little more pressure on it. It also helps to keep that pressure even. But I pull it through the back side of the grip or the bottom of the grip, and I press down over there too. You can see we're starting to take it down a little bit here. We're about down to 0.142. We're getting there. We're definitely bringing it down. You just got to keep going though. It's worth it, I think. I'm pretty sure. It's cool when it's done. Doing it twice sucks though, so pick your module, you know. Worst part is I'd really like to have done this to a black grip module myself, but I just really was afraid things wouldn't show up the same on camera, so I went with the second tan grip module. .1375 is the tight reading I'm getting.
check it again. Now it looks like we're making work out of this. So let's see. We're to 0.1205, 0.120. I am going to go ahead and try to fit the FCU in it and then slip a magazine into the grip module after I clean it out. And we're going to see if it clears the fire control unit. Alright, so our grip module is good and free of any loose debris that's going to gunk up that fire control unit. We'll go ahead and take that and make sure our pin's in and our spring is still where it needs to be there. And hook that trigger guard. Seat the rear end of it. Press it into place. Go ahead and put that takedown lever pin in. It's not too difficult. That's how you know you've taken off just the right amount of material, but it's also good and snug and doesn't want to just fall right out. Now at this time, we're not going to try to put the slide on it. The only thing we're going to try to do is see if a magazine will seat inside of it. The magazine button's not in though, so it'll fall right out if you're not careful. Kind of the moment of truth. Make sure that the magazine, this face of the magazine is pressed up against this wall of the magazine well. This one just barely fits. It does go in. It just barely fits. I really think, even though I don't want to, I need to take just a bit more material off. But again, we can always go back and take off more material, so maybe we should check and see how it fits with the magazine release. Alright, so to take care of this magazine release swap, it's pretty much identical to the real P320 grip module here as far as removal goes. If you'll notice, you press in on the left side and you'll see here there's a hole in the release. Well, if you kind of use a pick or a needle or a paper clip or something like that and you stick it down in this hole, you can pry upwards on it and you get the second piece of that magazine release to come forward and upwards, and you can just pull it out. And then be careful when you let this other piece of the magazine release out the other side of the grip module. A spring is going to come out with it. You don't want to drop that or lose it. Spring, second piece. Okay, and to put it back together, we have our three pieces and our X-frame grip module here. We're going to go ahead and set this small piece down. There's a guide for the spring to sit in this magazine button. Just kind of sit it in there for now. Careful for it to not fall out. Now it goes into this grip module, I believe, like so, on the left side to maintain that right-handed release. And you'll see it start to poke through. Careful to make sure that spring is in there. You'll know, because it's going to give you the springy motion you need here. Take that last piece of the magazine release. One end looks to be the opposite shape of what's left here, and the other end just kind of looks like it's almost like a rounded off arrowhead. That's the end that's going to go downwards in. You'll see it looks just like that. Keep that magazine release pressed in and just push down on that piece until it clicks into place. Now you've swapped that Airsoft VFC M17 mag release into your P320 grip module. So I guess kind of the moment of truth here. Let's see how the magazine fits. It doesn't drop free, and it's quite a tight fit in there. Because of that, I don't need to cant it to fit it, but it does take some effort to secure and lock in place, and I don't like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this takedown lever back out, remove the FCU, and I'm going to do a little more sanding work here on the inside, and I'm going to make things just a little bit smoother here for this magazine. This would work, but I do not like the fact that I have to tap it in, even though, let's be honest, that's something that I'm just kind of used to doing to make sure my magazines are seated. But I'm really happy with the progress I'm making. I'm gonna fine-tune it just a little bit more here. One thing I did notice is to sand this enough for it to work. It's gonna seem like a long road, but this magwell at the bottom is flared a little bit inside on all sides, even less so on this front face, but you've pretty much, as you can see here, got to get rid of the entire flare on the front face for enough material to be removed for you to have done it correctly. So you let that be kind of a guide while you're doing this. We've taken a fair amount of material off here, so I'm going to put the FCU back in. I'm going to put that magazine button in, and we're going to test fit a magazine and see how it goes after I clean this up. That's the kind of action I'm used to with my other grip module. The magazine goes in and it drops out freely. Just keep sanding the inside until you don't have issues anymore. This one, I think, will just become a little more friendly for me with time. Grab the slide, the barrel assembly, and the recoil spring guide assembly, and install them into the slide. Empty the grip module or the gun of any magazines and turn your takedown lever to the open position. Gently guide the slide on over the FCU rails. When you get to about this position where the back of your slide is just past the slide stop, that's when you want to start wiggling the takedown lever. And here we have a desk pop. Here you have turned your VFC Proforce 6R M17 into a VFC Proforce 6R P320. This was a long process. It was a lot of fun to figure out in the end, and it was very rewarding. Because you've done the work yourself, you're going to know what areas to kind of tweak or sand on a little more if you think that it needs to be modified a little more to fit better. I will tell you, the further you go with the sanding, the looser some things will get. I have noticed something, and that something is the takedown lever on my first model is significantly looser because I sanded more than necessary. It kind of also really doesn't matter, and you'll see that with any of these P320s, with them fully assembled, no matter how loose it was before, there's no way for this to come out of here. So it's not really too big of an issue if you do go a little more than you need to.